Okay, so we're going to continue look at Basar בחלב in page Zayin, then review a little bit these tests and go into Sif Yud. And we have time. If we have time, we'll see a little bit what Yud Aleph is all about. What's interesting about this Seifim is that it appears to be that even though we know Basar בחלב are Asr together in various forms, there are times that we try to be creative. In other words, is it possible to be creative and nevertheless permit the combination in some form? As I mentioned in the past, the Chachamim tell us that certain things that are asr, I should say, to us, you can find an alternative. You can find a particular fish, for example, that tastes like ham, the shibuta. So, is it okay for people to buy imitation bacon? I always tell people don't buy it. Don't keep it in your home because of marasayin. But obviously there's no isser in it. It's not the real thing. It's just an imitation. Today they have imitation shrimp. They have imitation crab, I think. All these little things that are really usser that we would never want to even look at. And for sure not eat it. So imitation. Is the imitation a problem of marasayin or not? Apparently not. I mean, it's not. If it says imitation, people know what it is, but it does look like the real thing. And it may sometimes present a problem for those who are not aware that this is... So anyway, I avoid it. I would definitely not have it in my simchas, in my home. I discourage it. But is it also? I guess not. I mean, you're eating something completely kosher, even though it may have the appearance as something that is asur. But people, I guess, are used to it. And if you're used to it, then there's not so much of an issue of marasayin. Nevertheless, marasayin is a problem. We've spoken about it. It does apply to certain halachas. And it could very well apply to this. In dealing with cheese making, the cheese making process, we began to explain, and by the way, maybe we'll leave the presentation if I have the time for next week. In making cheese, part of the process that involves making cheese does involve using some form of basar. Let's call it some form of basar, which we call rennet. Rennet is from the skin. Rennet is from the hides. The rennet can be made from other byproducts as well that bring about a similar result to the rennet. And what's the problem with them? The problem is, well, first of all, if it comes from skin, it could be a problem of basar b'chalav. All right? That's number one. Number two, if it comes from a non-kosher animal, obviously, then you're dealing with nevelis or treifas. So how is it possible to make altogether using these? So we introduced the fact that sometimes when things are dry and they're not edible, maybe that does not qualify as being asur. Because if something is dry and not edible, perhaps even though it appears to be the real thing, it comes from the real thing, the fact that it has changed status and it's not roy la'achila does not qualify it as basar. So neither would it be a problem of basar b'chalav, and or it will not be a problem with nevelis or treifas. After all, something which has been treif and is totally not royal achila is not asur behano. Basar b'chalav may present a problem of isur behano in any form or shape, but a regular nevelis or treifa, if you somehow, what you accomplished was that you basically removed any flavorings, completely dried it up, it may be considered panim chadashos. Have you ever heard of this concept, panim chadashos? Mm-hmm. Only in Sheva Brachas, right? In Sheva Brachas, you hear the idea of you need to have panim chadashot. When you're making for the chatan and kala, you're making a Sheva Brachas, you should invite for the Sheva Brachas. Yeah, somebody that was not attended at the wedding. But that's so people associate panim chadashot with Sheva Brachas. But there is a concept that's brought down by Rabbi Elyahu, and we may not get to it today, but that if an Isser has become a panim chadashos, in other words, it's not what it was, then it's no longer the Isser. And the reason I'm giving you this information right now is I'm preparing you for the gelatin, and how that comes in, and why there's a machlokes till this very day, whether to permit the gelatin that is made from animal, from nevelas and treifas. So we need to understand that it is possible to be creative. There's nothing wrong with that. As long as, of course, there's a yesod for it. In other words, there's a yesod for something that is not edible, for not being treif. As opposed to what? As opposed to something which may be atzomos. In other words, it's only the bones of the animal that we've spoken about, that it may not be the Isser Deoraisa, but it's still also midrabanan, right? You cannot have the bones. You cannot just eat the bones of a treif animal. Lechatchila. It's also midrabanan. Bedi Eved, we've already covered those halachas, either in Hilchos Taaruvot or in a brief review now, that there are various shitas on what is the status of bones. Okay, so there are various shitas on what happens if bones were cooked with, in other words, non-kosher bones were cooked with kosher bones. As far as being mitztaref, to be mevatel, or not being mitztaref, various shitas. And then we discussed briefly also what the status of bones being cooked with milk is, which somehow it appears to be a little bit trickier, because even though the Mechaber in Hilchos Taaruvos is very lenient with bones, here he says, you know what? You barely got away with it, he says. You're potter. What? Potter means it's aser. So there's a little bit more of a chumrah in cooking bones with milk, even though that's not basar b'chalav. Okay, so we were able to rule out, of course, the lechatchila use of bones in basar b'chalav, and of course, we would not lechatchila want to use treif bones either, in any case.
When you say treif, you also include from a tameh animal?
Yes, of course, yes. Treif, nevela, and tameh. Now, by a tameh, there would be some additional problems. Because if we're dealing with basar b'chalav, and we're dealing with bones, and we're dealing with making cheese, which is a cold process, then you're dealing with a complete derabanan issue, because there's no bishul going on. So even if you were to say that the bones present a problem of basar b'chalav, it's cold. So the whole thing is that the Rabbanan, when it comes to basar b'chalav, if at all, right? Whereas by introducing nevela, it has nothing to do with bishul anymore. Or does it? Nevela is nevela, you're eating the nevela. But I'm not cooking it. Oh, you're not cooking it? Well, there may be other issues you're not cooking it. What are the other issues? Melicha, kavush, and kavush is kemevushal. You know what kavush is? There are ways that you can introduce a flavor into something else, into another food, without cooking. One way is to immerse the two together and keep them in a jar overnight in water. Since they're both soaking in the same water, the ta'am will travel from the isser to the heter, or in this, it doesn't have to be isser. It could be pickles, right? It could be whatever it is that you're making, that you're curing. Would that be the word in English? Yeah? Right? So that has a koach. That definitely has a koach to introduce or to have the tam penetrate the other food item. Same thing with meliach, as we began to explain last time. Meliach keroteach, something that two items that are salted together, it's very powerful. That salt has heat. It enables the tam to get through. It enables even blood to get through. That's what we use salt for, is to extract the blood. So salt is very powerful. It's used to preserve meat, and it has various uses. Very, very powerful stuff. So other than bishul, you can accomplish something similar to bishul by kavush, by soaking it. And when we say soaking it, it doesn't have to be in water. It could also be in brine. And what will be the difference? That if it's in brine, something very, very acidic in nature, vinegar perhaps too, depending on the shitas. There's different shitas about the difference between vinegar and brine. You wouldn't even have to wait 24 hours. If it sat there for a number of minutes, the amount of time that it would take to cook something on a regular flame for it to boil, that's how fast the brine will do its work. And, if Isser is involved, then we have a problem. Then it has become treif, whatever it's sat together in close proximity. Right? So, in learning Hilchos Taaruvot, we discuss this because we also discuss close proximity in other fashions. Smoking two things together, roasting two things together, so there's no liquid involved. Remember? What if you want to make cheesecake in the same oven as you're making your steak? You only have one oven. Can you do it? The answer is, it may be possible if you cover the meat, the one that it meets the steam, right, the vapors. Not recommended, however, do it at the same time, but you're in a rush. And of course that led us to other questions on using the same oven within the same day, even though you're not cooking at the same time, Basar בחלב, using it at the same time, same day for both. After you've done with your meat, can you do it? Can you put cheesecake now in? So we see that there is problems with having two things that should not be together, having them in close proximity, either being baked at the same time, roasted at the same time, smoked at the same time, and of course kovush, being immersed in the same jar. So immersed in the same jar would not qualify it as an Isser min Torah of Basar b'chalab, because the Isser is only real bishul. Even though the Gemara says kavush is kemevushal, it is equal, this thing called kavush, not for Basar b'chalab. Basar b'chalab is a unique Isser that requires real cooking. But in order to have an Isser, make something kosher Asr, it's enough for them to be immersed in water. And of course that would be 24 hours. But if it would be tzir, it would be even less amount of time. So there are various ways something can become Asr, because it's in close proximity to an Isser. We also discussed the difference of something is fat or not fat. Something that is fatty, meat that is fatty, has more koach, more strength to be able to give over its flavoring into that other item that is next to it. And of course, these things can make a difference from time to time in our own home, in the refrigerator. Milk fell onto meat. By mistake, you poured the meat on top of the chicken that was left over from Shabbos. What now? We'll be learning these halachas in Basar b'chalab. That one is relatively easy because we're talking about cold milk and cold chicken. But you'll be surprised that even though the chicken is cold, if chicken is spiced up, it has a different status. Meat that is spicy, meat that is cooked and it has already spices inside of it, it's a little bit different than meat that is just fresh and not cooked and not spiced up. These things, they make a difference.
Now, cold and milk is also
the Rabbanah, right?
So the shvus here.
Don't bring in shvus of Hilchos Shabbos. Yeah. Obviously, you could say that if it was a big hefsed, you could say, hey, listen, this is a Rabbanah anyway. It's a Rabbanah. Let me just rinse it out and not be so machmir. Yeah, of course.
Well, rinsing it out in any event.
Right. The question. Well, that's the question. If rinsing is the only thing that's required, then it would not be even a kasha. The question is if more than rinse was required. If I had to take a klipa or kedin atila, and I didn't, or I didn't know which piece of meat was it, that's when you have these questions. Do we really have to be machmir, remove a klipa from all of them, if we don't have shishim? So anyway, we'll get to it. So various forms of heat, various forms of proximity may cause problems. We spoke already before about tato govar, that which is, that which is at the bottom has more strength than that which is on the top. So if the bottom is hot and the bottom is cold, it could be a problem. We spoke about sli, we mentioned that already. All kinds of heat, all kinds of positions that can make a difference. Here, right now, what we're dealing with is something very, very different. We're going to be dealing with rennet and gelatin, which may not necessarily be an issue as far as amount is concerned. Why? Because you have more than shishin that's required. Then what is the problem? What could be the problem? Especially if it's dry. Especially if it's not food. The problem could be dover hamamid. Dover hamamid is a drabanan, and it says that if an ingredient contributes immensely to a product in forming it, in maintaining its shape, then it's not batal afilu be'elef. That is seen in cheese, The dover amame is exactly the ingredient that makes the cheese, that coagulates the milk and forms the cheese. And you see it in yogurts, where certain yogurts have gelatin, and what does the gelatin do to the yogurt? It makes it creamy. The gelatin has the ability to act as an emulsifier, of mixing certain things that would ordinarily not mix. And that's what you want to achieve, of course. This can do it. Well, if this is the one that's doing that, do we give it we give it more importance because of that? Is it more chashuv? It's like a form of mamid. It actually makes the whole thing. So this is a question in Hilchas Bitul. We haven't even gotten to the kashrus yet of that ingredient. This is just a question of, even if you say it's not kosher, maybe it's batel. No. It's not necessarily going to be batel because it could be a dover amamid. All right? And then there is something called ze v'ze goyrem, which we'll briefly see at the very end of Sif Yud Aleph, which we won't get there today. Ze v'ze goyrem is a very interesting halacha. It says that if I have two factors that are contributing almost the same towards making something, one is treif and the other one is kosher, well, the one that's treif is not alone. It's not the only one. There's a kosher one. Ze v'ze gorem. They both contribute. It's not just a non-kosher ingredient. If there is another kosher ingredient that is just as important, so then perhaps this one is not so important after all. Because there's another one there who's doing something very similar to this.
Is it sufficient 5148?
Yeah, well, when we get to that, that's a good question. Yeah, what is exactly the proportions of Zev Goren? All right, so now that we see that there are various ways that perhaps we can get around, I don't like to use the word get around, because we're not trying to defeat Chas v'Shalom this Isser, but there are maybe permissible uses of something which would ordinarily be Asr, and it's no longer an Isser. Something that is completely dry, or the Chalav that is found in the Keva, which is what we're talking about now. Chalav that is found in the Keva is milk, it's real milk, that became so sour and acidic that it's called Pirsha Be'alma. The way we hold, at least. Pirsha meaning that it's no longer edible.
And does it have to be the calf?
That's where it was found.
So
because the chalav that we're talking about is not the chalav that one finds in the atinim, in the udder, which is really a milk that never really separated. This is a milk that was once separate from the animal. It was a mother's milk that this young calf took and absorbed and began to digest. So this chalav is much more strict, according to some opinions, than the chalav that's found in the kachal. Kachal is the udder, because it's part of it. It was never apart from it. This milk has become a part. It was separated itself from the mother. The only thing is that this milk is no longer real milk because it's beginning to become digested. So it begins to be pirsha. If it begins to be pirsha, then it's not real milk anymore. It has stopped being real milk. Well, just like we said about meat and bones, that they can perhaps stop being meat or food by becoming so dry or by becoming a piece of plastic, depending on how they process it into capsules, the gelatin. Basically, it's not edible even for animal consumption. So this milk has stopped becoming edible, and perhaps I can use it now. Perhaps I can use it now in one of my favorite recipes, chalav that's found in a keva. Now, you think this is unusual? Well, let's briefly go to gelatin. I'm not going to go right now into the whole machlokes. I'll leave that for later, maybe. One of the problems that surfaced with fish gelatin, have you heard of that? Fish. Let's avoid the problems with animal gelatin. Let's go to kosher gelatin. How are we going to get kosher gelatin? Well, either by slaughtering animals in the kosher way and getting a batch of kosher hides, so you can take a little bit of that hide, or use fish. Now, there are plants. There is all kinds of xanthan gum, agar-agar, carob gum. I mean, there are various ingredients, I forget all of them, that are used as equivalents to gelatin that have a similar effect. They're not as strong. They don't produce exactly the same jelly effect as the carrageenan, as the other types of gelatins, but some of them are, do something. So it depends what you're trying to accomplish. It may be sufficient to use some of these vegetable type of gelatin to produce, yogurts. But to produce marshmallows or to, make some other dishes that require something very gelatinous, like Jell-O, right? They may not be enough. So they want to use the real thing, either the hides from animal or the bones. So here comes along somebody and says, well, I want to avoid this problem, this machloket, and I'm going to use fish. Okay, great. Now, all you got to make sure right now is that you're using kosher fish, of course, which is a separate problem. As you know, when they catch fish in mass production, they catch some non-kosher fish too. So when this concept of fish...
And that itself...
Well, it can be.
Just being caught together as an isser?
No, if you're going to grind them all together.
They're processed together.
Processed together, sure. No. Because even though you don't do business with non-kosher food on a regular basis, if you catch a shark once in a while, you can sell it to the guy. You can even sell it. No. Yeah, you can sell it. On a regular basis, the halacha says you cannot do business with non-kosher food.
Like baby shark?
Oh, you can have a shark tank. You can have parrots also. You can own pets. You can't eat them. And you can't do business. You can't sell them. Unless you're selling horses. Because horses in this country, at least usually, is not sold for horse meat. Now, in France, it may be a different problem. Because there, they use horse meat. So basically, the halacha is, the Rabbanan, that is, we cannot do business with non-kosher food. You don't want a Jew buying it, of course, make a mistake thinking, I'm buying from a Jew. There's various reasons why we don't do business with non-food. But if it happens that you caught in your net some non-kosher fish, you can sell those because it only happened that you caught, but you're not regularly doing business. Okay, so there's this problem that you want to make sure, and that requires good hashgacha, that not too many fish that are not kosher are getting processed together with the kosher fish. Now, there was a heter. Basically, they allowed it under certain supervisions that even though it may happen, it may be okay. All right, fine. We're done with it. We have kosher gelatin made from fish. What could be the problem now? Then somebody remembered, but wait a minute. Can I use this kosher gelatin from fish with my favorite meat recipe?
No, but we said the gelatin original product anymore. So
I think we covered this a little bit, that even though most Ashkenazim don't have a problem of having fish with milk, lox with cream cheese, but the halacha is very clear, we do not have meat with fish in the same plate. We don't eat the two together at the same time. And on Shabbos, when you eat your fish, after you've done with your fish, you have some schnapps, you have some challah, you have something to rinse your mouth, so you don't have the two together. Why? Because of sakana. Health reasons. Oh, if that's the case, I think there's a Pischei Tshuva that brings down the Darkei Tshuva, I think. Yeah. That, if I have gelatin made from fish, he's not bringing this example, but this example will relate to this Pischei Tshuva. If I'm going to be using gelatin that's made from fish, and so far so good, I don't have a problem where it comes from, wait a minute, but I'm not allowed to have fish with meat, and the chef just told me he has a great recipe, that he wants to put this gelatin in the meat. Well, what would you say? Batul b'shishim. No. Batul b'shishim is not so simple anymore. Why not? Because when do we say bitul b'shishim? When you're dealing with isser, because it's usser. It's chaylev, it's nevela, it's right. But whenever the Chachamim said, don't eat it because it's a sakana, they told us the chamira sakanto mi isura. Something that is usser because of danger is more chamor, stricter, than if it's usser because it's usser. You gotta watch your health. You better be careful. You know that some of those mushrooms you might see in the forest are very poisonous? Don't take a chance.
probably more.
No. I don't know. Statistically, I don't think so. It's only a few that are known to be very, very poisonous. You have a little bit of it, and it's a big problem. Yeah.
But nevertheless, we did say that it was product anymore.
Okay.
Gelatin.
All right.
So why would fish it by
So what you're saying is it may no longer have the flavor.
It may not flavor. It may no longer have the consequence.
Exactly. You're right. That's the question. Yes.
We know that you take a pan, you have
Right.
meat layers, and then cook fish in it. Even though why don't we work? That's the flavor.
Right.
Kind of there.
Nobody worries about the
Because
bliss.
there, because they say Tom Ke'ikr. The blias, the problem is Tom Ke'ikr. I said, that's the Tom that we're worried about.
If there's this time, there has some.
Nevertheless, you may raise that point. We're not so machmir on the tam, on the blias. In other words, apparently that it's not significant enough to cause a problem. Which basically it leads to what you were saying too. In the transformation of this gelatin, perhaps it's no longer a problem.
We do worry about it with things like Worcestershire, so made with fish.
Correct. Very, very, very true. Real fish. Real fish. That's very good. Very good. Very good. Very good. That's right. Not all of them are made with fish. Yeah.
Not all of them are marked.
Oh, not all of them are marked? Yeah.
No, the quantity.
Could be. Well, good point. That's a very good example of something that maybe is an issue, that you would not be able to have it with meat, and you shouldn't, of course. So the question here is, do we apply the halachas of bitul by something that is also mitama sakana? It's a machlokes. Some say bitul is bitul, regardless of why it's also. Some say no, when something is also machmas sakana, the halachas of bitul don't apply. So you may not be able to eat this fish gelatin with your favorite meat recipe. But anyway, there are enough heterim to say that this gelatin, in the form that it is, and the amount that that is there, that should not be a problem. But not everybody is mako. So usually this does not pose a problem because most people don't put fish gelatin in meat recipe. But should that ever be an issue, you know that there may be some that would argue against it. That's all. So I figure you should know that. Yeah. Anyway,
it's a rice.
no, it's still a derabana, but it's chamira sakanto misura.
Right.
It's more. Right. Yeah. Right.
Does that help?
You mean Suffolk derabana?
Since you have a machlokes,
Yeah.
it's a derabana.
Right.
So by the gelatin, it is a suffix.
Yeah, but here we're talking about in a lechatchila situation. You know, should we be machmir? Is there reason enough to? What is that? Right. Yeah, but not lechatchila. In other words, Rav Moshe Feinstein, one of the reasons that he asks gelatin made from hides or from bones that are treif is because it's a suffix derabbanan. Either it's a suffix. He asks it, yeah.
Because it's a suffix.
Because, yeah. Either it's a suffix, he says, or it's mamash aser. Okay? So it's a suffix, it's a suffix. But you don't have it lechatchila. Yeah.
But that would be with respect to a doraisa. The itzer would be the doraisa.
Well, it begins with the doraisa
Right.
itzer. Yeah.
Here by gelatin, we don't have the itzer, no.
Why not?
Because we have a question whether this is the itzer. Is this still the same product?
No, but if we're talking about hides versus bones, it is a doraisa.
That's what I mean.
Not by the bones. You're right.
Sorry. I meant the fish. I didn't mean fish.
Yeah, but gelatin fish, you're right. It would be less of a problem.
saying
Yeah.
something about
Right. Yes.
That would be. I'm gelatin.
Yeah, except that you wouldn't say a suffix by a sakana. That's the thing. Imagine somebody telling you you're coming to a banquet. Oh, by the way, the cook by mistake poured some rat poison into the soup. Don't have that soup. And he said, I don't believe that. Are you going to take a chance anyway?
No, but the example of a poison would to me sound more like the rice than the rabbanon poison.
Yes.
Why?
Why? Because
Who says the rat poison was? Maybe
no,
it's
no,
vegetable-based rat poison.
No, this is like
I mean, maybe.
it's talking about just because it's dangerous.
No, that's the whole point.
Right.
Just because it's
Yeah.
How can a rat poison be true?
Yeah. Well, it
You
depends.
have kosher red poison? Only for kosher?
Yeah. But anyway, let's go on. So we discussed that the chalav animtza bekeva is a machlokes. The various shittas who hold what is the status of this chalav that apparently is no longer a chalav. It's a pirsha be'alma. But not everybody, of course, considers it a mamash pirsha. We have a shita, the shita of Rabbi Tam, who distinguishes between it's tzolol or if it's korush, if it's in a liquid form or if it's in a solid form. The liquid form is more of a problem, he says. And we have the shita that holds, regardless of its form, which is what the mechaber holds like, that it's pirsha. Pirsha means it's not food, it's not edible, it's lost its status, it's no longer considered milk. And then you have Rashi that says regardless, this is still it's going to be always going to be a problem. What's the havamina? The havamina, of course, here is that I would like to use perhaps some of the chalav here to make cheese, because this chalav, because of its acidity right now, does have the enzyme, with the ability, the physical ability to make cheese. That's number one. And number two, I may want to be able to cook it in my favorite meat recipe. So the Mechaber tells us that cholav animtza bekeva eno cholav umutu levashel bo basar. In other words, besides cheese, you would actually, it's so bad, it's no longer milk, that you could actually cook with it basar afilu betzolol sheba. So he holds like the shita that even if it's tzolol, it's not a problem. It's no longer considered. Very interesting, of course, halacha that basically says this used to be milk, it's no longer milk. If you say it's pirsha, it means it's not food. If it's not food, it's not the real thing. However, the Mechaber says yesh misha oiser. Some say, no, you can't do that. Don't do it. V'chen lo yagin, the Ramah says, that's the minik. But what would be the din b'di'evet? The din b'di'evet would be, like the Mechaber says in the first opinion, that it's not a problem. Therefore, b'di'evet, if you did it anyway, you don't have to be concerned about it whatsoever. It's not like potur or balosor, right? According to the Mechaber, you don't have to worry about it. The Ramah, of course, is going to make a difference. He's going to say that, of course, it makes a difference if it's the soft one, the liquid form, or the solid form. No.
That was, I wasn't what
Yeah.
which was there.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right. Right.
The Ramah makes a difference.
We're going to see.
Okay.
That's what we're going to see later on in Sif Yud as well. What would be the din here in B'di'evet according to the Ramah? Actually, let me see if I can find it over here. There's a Darchei Moshe that explains this a little bit more. Actually, we'll see that in Sif Yud. The Darchei Moshe really more applies to Sif Yud, where we see again the difference between Tzolol and Korosh. Anyway, we explained also that the Mechaber, whenever he says Yesh Misha Oiser, he holds like the first opinion, but he considers the second opinion. So the halacha is like the stam, like the first opinion according to Mechaber, but you need to consider the second opinion as well. In Sif Yud, what is different is that this chalav was allowed to remain in the keva. Somehow it remained in the keva, intentionally or by mistake, and it got salted together. And we explained that Melicha is keroseach, and when something is salted together, it somehow has absorbed some of the tam of whatever it was salted with. And here the problem is that it's absorbing something of the keva itself, of the skin, of the hide, of the stomach. That's basar. We're not talking about something that is not kosher. Something that's kosher, but the problem is the basar b'chalav situation. But why should it be a problem? Isn't this chalav pirsha be'alma anyway? We just finished saying in Sif Tes that this chalav is pirsha be'alma anyway. Why should this even be a problem? So let me read it first. Chalav animtza be'keva. So it brings down over here that lechatchila in lehanichu b'keva, never leave it there until it cools off, in a chalav b'toch hakeva. Never leave it there too long. It's not a good idea. Aber b'di'evet ein lochush. If it stayed, it's not going to be a problem. When is there a problem? Shenimlach b'kevosar. Now we're in trouble. So before we go on to nimlach b'kevosar, let's review again. How much is nimlach? We said meliach is keroseach. Okay. Just like kavush is kemevusho, meliach is keroseach. It's like you cooked it almost. It's like sli. It's like roasting. How much? So lechatchila, when you're using Melicha, when you're using salt to draw out blood, you have to cover the whole chicken, the whole piece of meat. Even if you didn't cover every square inch, it's okay. But you have to make sure of two things. You have to make sure that there's enough salt that it's not edible because of its saltiness. It's so salty, not just you just sprinkled a little bit of salt. It's so salty that it's eino nechal machmas molchoy. That's number one. And number two, there are 18 minutes or so that are required at the very minimum to draw out the blood. So these conditions in Hilchas Melicha are applicable here too, because if you say Meliach is kereseach, and it's going to cause me problem when two pieces of meat are next to each other being salted together, and one is straight and one is kosher. Or, as in this case, we're going to have chalav being nimlach together in the keva. How much are we talking about? Well, we're talking about, lechatchila at least, the same amount of salt that we would require in Melicha, obviously. If it was just a little bit of salt, it's not the same problem. At least it's not going to answer the whole thing. And it would have to be the same amount of time, supposedly. However, that's the lechatchila din. The Ramah is machmer when it comes to Melicha, just like he's machmer between fatty versus non-fatty, that we're not bekiim, and we're going to treat meat as though it is fat. We don't know. We're not such experts. And fatty meat, we know, is a bigger problem than non-fatty meat when it comes to tzli or it comes to Melicha. In the same way that they're going to be, various poskim are going to be machmir that even though I did not have the salt on there for the 18 minutes, it can be a problem. In other words, there's a shita that holds that even if you had it enough time for it to cook on the water, for it to boil, right? Like tzir, the shear of kobush in tzir, not kobush in water, which is 24 hours. Kobush in tzir is enough to cook in it, to get it to a boil. If you had it there just for a little bit of time, like that, some say it would be already asur. And even if you don't say it's asur completely, some say that as soon as it begins to be salted, it almost immediately becomes a little bit asur. That's the question. I mean, do you say
what's a little bit?
Ekadei klipa. Yeah. So some say no. If it was not the shear there, nothing happened. Some say no. As soon as you began to salt it, it's right away, it's asur. So we're going to see the various shitas that hold it, how much time is required. We'll review it. But in the meantime, what we need to know is that Melicha is going to cause a problem over here because it's going to be absorbing the tama basar, supposedly. So either, regardless of the shear, let's say you have the sheer amount of time and you have the sheer amount of salt, you have that according to the strictest shita that says it has to be salty, it has to be enough time. Okay, fine. But what's the problem going to be here? It's going to absorb the tama basar. So cholav animtza bekeva shenimlach bekevasa, oy she'omad bo yom echad, kovush, 24 hours. Also le'amid boy. Now you want to take it now a little bit of this cholav to make cheese? Asur. Why? What's the problem over here? You just finished telling us that cholav animtza bekeva ain't no cholav. Why should this be a problem? The chalav. Yeah.
We want to use
Yeah. This chalav can be used for davar maimed. But you know what? The halacha would apply equally lechara to the keva too. It doesn't. It could be. I think it could be either or. The only reason I'm using the example of chalav is because that is where the kasha is. The keva.
In kasha.
No. Keva was always a keva. My kasha, it's not my kasha, is you just finished telling me the chalav is not chalav to begin with. Why should there be any problem of it sitting and being salted with a keva? If we say this is not milk, what problem can there be? That it absorbed something from the keva as a result of the melicha? So what? Keva is always keva. It was always good. It was always meat. It's not dry. No. Yeah. But the problem is that it's keva. In other words, the keva is not pirsha. The cholav is the pirsha.
And therefore,
but you're right. You can look at it the other way around too. In any event, yeah. Okay.
You should absorb from Basar.
But you will see why it makes more sense with the Pirsha. You will see in a minute. Why? Huh?
The pure absorbed Basar. It
Right.
absorbed.
Right.
The Basar absorbed from the nothing was inedible, therefore it didn't absorb anything. So
The what should be okay?
then
The cave?
the flesh should be okay, because what it absorbed, if anything, we already held was not food.
Right.
It was inedible.
Right.
So at the time it absorbed something, it was pierced.
Yeah.
The Basar should be, the other hand, the pierced stuff that was real, the Basar was still
That's
there.
correct. Yeah. Very good. So
No,
But the Persia is Persia.
That's a chiluk between the.
that's the way to look at it.
But the Persia is Persia.
Right. We're going
It's
to
not
go.
milk. So it's not milk that absorbed meat.
Oh,
It's
oh,
Persia
oh,
that
oh,
absorbed
yeah.
meat.
Oh,
Otherwise,
That's the issue.
Now you're understanding it exactly.
That's the issue of the
Right.
challah, you might have an issue to
Why? It's not halab, it's Persia.
Right.
But the Basar clearly shouldn't have.
Right. Okay. So
But
now.
the Persia isn't halab, so
Okay.
what problem?
No. So you're both right.
No.
You're both
Saying
right.
In the Persia there is a problem.
No. Yes. Yeah, you're both right, and I'll tell you why you're both right. Because now you began to explain it very well. This Pirsha is absorbing the Basar, if it did in fact absorb it. And what's going to happen now?
But it's Persia that. So what's,
Listen,
nothing can happen.
Ignore it. Ignore the Pirsha. There's Basar there.
Yeah.
I'm making cheese with this. I'm putting Basar into the cheese. This is not dry.
But
It's
you're
rennet.
taking from the cave, the rennet.
Right. And in this.
But that would be the problem with whether there was Persia or not.
Right.
Yeah, so it's
But
nothing to do with the
No,
Persia.
the cable will be dry.
No. One more time. The keva is fresh. Okay? Fresh keva.
So you
No
can't
dry-
put the keva into the
No, I
anyway.
can't.
You
I
can't
can't.
take any rennet from the keva anyway.
No, not at this point, unless I dry it up. And I make rennet from it. Correct. The Pirsha, however,
Excuse me. So then, if the Persia goes into the keva and you're going to now use the keva for the milk, you still can't use it. Granted, what went into the keva was Persia, but you're going to use from that same stomach to put into milk. How can you do that? You're talking about it's a fresh, numb-dried stomach. So I don't care that what went into it during the salting is Persia. I can't use that stomach to start up a cheese.
that's correct.
So if I can't use the Persia because it got absorbed from the stomach, I can't use the stomach even though it absorbs from the Persia.
That's correct. But
So
the
if you're
thing-
going to allow me to use the stomach because it was only Persia that it absorbed, then I can likewise use the Persia because it's only Persia that absorbed nothing.
But it didn't absorb Pirsha. Pirsha doesn't have anything to give off.
No, but I can't use the stomach regardless of whether it absorbed anything.
right.
According to the case that we're discussing right now,
That's why-
the stomach is real meat. I'm going to use that to start up the milk.
That's
Can't
why.
use it because
That's
it's
why.
meat.
No. That's what he's saying. That's very good. The
It's not
problem-
because of the Persia.
It's not because of the Persia. It's because of the
But I
stomach.
can't use it to
I
start.
can't
up
use it. So
Right.
so therefore, the reality here, the Metzias here, you're saying, mat'im. It fits more the scenario of where the Pirsha absorbed something from the meat,
But it had to be real live meat.
real live meat. yeah.
And then it's aser.
Then it's aser.
Then it's also aser if the meat absorbed the Persia, because the meat is aser anyway.
The meat is aser anyway,
Right.
right? So that's not the question.
So
Really.
the Persia can't permit the meat that's aser.
Right.
Right, so you can't.
So that's
tell
why
me
that's
that
not the example.
If the meat absorbed the Persia, it's okay, but if the Persia absorbed the meat, it's not okay. You
Yeah.
can't
No,
make
no,
that
we're not
deal.
saying that. Right. We're not
It
making
has
that.
to be either permitted in both cases or prohibited in both cases.
Right. But for different reasons.
He has a question.
Right.
If it's something Pirsha,
Right.
then it has no tam.
That's correct.
If it has no tam, it could not emit. If it could not emit, then the Basar could not absorb something that was never emitted.
And you can use that butter to start up a cheese?
Yeah, no, but
no. I now want to eat the Basar by itself.
By
not
itself.
a steak.
Right.
I want to eat that Basar.
It would
for
be no
steak.
problem. You're right.
That should be no
Now,
problem.
if the
You're
Persia,
right.
if the Persia absorbed the basra, I can't eat the Persia?
Yes, you could.
Of course.
Right.
So the only time
Yeah.
you get a situation
Right.
where I can't use it's because the Persia is transporting a basar, which is actually the isser.
Right.
So then I can't use the basar either.
That's why I'm saying that's the scenario. That's why this is more likely the scenario here, because that apparently is a problem for some reason. What is the reason? Because we are, through the process of Melicha, have absorbed in this Pirsha a tam basar, a tam, which will be a problem in the making of cheese if I want to use this
Either of the two.
right, if I want to use this Pirsha to make the meat. This Pirsha can make meat, can make can make cheese because of its acidity. So cholav animtza bekeva, shenimlach bekevasa, or she'omad bo yom echad. It was there 24 hours. Also lehamid boy. I can't. But but the question right now is like this. This chalav is a pirsha, right? So I don't have a problem of basar b'chalav.
Between the keva and the chalav.
Between the kelev and the chalav. So if anything, it's only the tam habasar that's being carried in the pirsha that could present here a problem. Okay, so that was, that's what I was beginning to ask, but obviously it's not a question because pirsha will remain pirsha. So what is the problem? The problem is it's carrying the basar. Okay, so he says, also lehamid boy. Ramah, ve'im ha'amid boy, if he did, imu atzolo, if it's the liquid form, osir.
Who's tzalo here?
The pirsha. Oiser kolak vinois. Because the Ramah holds like the Shita, where you're mechalik between solol and korosh in the pirsha. Right? Rabbeinu Tam. So he says, therefore, if you did it by mistake, and you took this as a ma'imid to make cheese, all the cheeses would be aser ad sheyeh shishim b'cholav, shehe'emid, that you used, neged akeva ha'asura. Until you have shishim in the cholav shehe'emid, the new milk, shishim neged hakeva ha'asura, which means here neged, not the keva itself, the stomach, but the milk that became treif. In other words, you would need shishim in the milk, the new milk, that you're making cheese, keneged the cholav animtza b'keva.
But he says against that.
Right, but here it means the same thing. It means the keva, it means the milk, not the keva. Okay? Because you're basically, the keva has become osir. In a way, it has become osir like chanan.
Why is the keva?
Because of the tam in it.
The tam of what?
The tam of basar from the keva.
So the keva has become asur because the tam of basar is the pirsha has become
I should
asur.
let's call it pirsha because it's confusing. Sometimes keva refers to the pirsha. By the way, I may not have been clear last time. That's why it's a little confusing. Keva, when you see by itself, usually means its stomach. It's one of the stomachs. But sometimes keva means the pirsha,
the milk,
the actual milk that's sitting there,
the digested milk.
the digested milk. So you would need, if according to the Ramah, you would need shishim in the cholav atzolul. If it's cholav pirsha tzolul, you would need in the new milk in the vat, enough milk in this vat that you're making cheese now. Shishim keneged the pirsha.
But I thought you said it because of the fact that whatever it is.
No, that's a good question too. That's the shach's question.
Because whatever is a mamid on the fact that
you heard the question?
Became converted.
The mamid bottle b'shish. Well,
No, that's the shach's question.
Again, because the thing that affected a changed permitted substance,
right.
Now that permitted substance, by having become changed, it is always noticeable that there is the isser involved in its transformation.
Right.
So it's like it's a kind of almost like a be'ain.
Anyway, we're going to see that. That's the shach.
the Ramah starts off saying it was left in this too long by not on purpose, I would assume.
Anyway, we're going to get to that. We don't want to go too late, so we're just going to cover this point in the shach's question. So what's going on over here? So we have the Melicha process causing a problem, a potential problem of blia of Basar. What happens b'di'evet? He only says also l'amid boy. But we know what he holds b'di'evet. The Mechaber holds b'di'evet. It's never a problem anyway. It's pirsha. So what if it's pirsha? So what if
That's
it's
like saying a spoon means a piece of meat dropped in the milk. It's only a spoon. But there's meat on that spoon.
Exactly. So the Darchim Moshe explains that Bain, according to the Mechaber, who holds that solol or korish doesn't make a difference. Bain, according to the Ramah, who says only imhu hat solol oiser kol agvines. But if it will be korish, it's not a problem. What is the heter over here to begin with? In other words, in those situations where it's mutter, either according to the Mechaber, solol or korish in the Pirsha, or according to the Ramah, if it's korish, what's the heter over here? There's a blia of basar. The heter is, the Darchim Moshe explains, that the blia in the Pirsha has no effect whatsoever. The tam habasar in the Pirsha is completely ineffective.
And what renders it effective?
So that, there's
It's
two
not-
ways
it's
of...
not enough or not.
Right, there's two ways of understanding that. Yeah. The Vilna Gaon says it a little. The Vilna Gaon also says something similar to this, but the Shach says it a little bit differently. The Shach says Pshat is that the Pirsha does not have any more the koach as Pirsha to be mavliya the tam, to transfer over the tam. Whereas the way it's understood from the Darchei Moshe, the way he explains it is that the Basar that is nivla in the Pirsha is Pirsha too.
That makes more sense.
Either one has not. Either you learn that it has no koach to transfer it. It's not clear if that's what it's meant by the Shach, that it doesn't have the koach to transfer it, or like the Darchei Moshe simply learns that it's simply tam of Basar in Pirsha is Pirsha. Interesting, no? Yeah. Yeah. Anyway, real quick question. The Taz asked a quick question over here. Why do you need shishim over here? Keneged the cholov amaymed. Keneged the whole thing. If we talk about Melicha is only oiser kedei klipa. Yeah. Unless you're machmer, this doesn't apply. This is a pure case of simple Melicha. It says, according to the Rosh at least, the Rosh says according to the Ramah, we're machmer, something else, but according to the Rosh, you're always going to have a question here. How do you explain that you're going to need shishim if Melicha is only asas kedei klipa? So he says, what is really happening over here, cholov in the keva, is a form of kovush, much more than Melicha. The fact that it's sitting
so it's not so even without salt, then it should be a problem.
Yeah, that's what it says.
Or maybe you need salt in order for it to be.
Maybe, yeah.
That's through the salt becomes kavush.
Yeah, well, it says she'omad bo yom echad.
Because
or she'omad bo, yeah.
When you pickle something, it's a difference when you pickle it in water and salt water.
Yeah.
So maybe the salt makes it a more amplified process.
Yeah, so that's the nekudas hakesef that can gives that teretz. Yeah. Primogodim said Primogodim requires shishim keneged the entire thing because of the din chanan. He says that's the problem over here, and therefore even if you had a little bit of you only had a little bit of keva in this, a little bit of the stomach inside the what do you call it, the prisha, the pirsha, you would still need you need shishim against the whole pirsha because chanan.
Who is
that cholov, that pirsha? Yeah. That Pri Megadim says that this is a type of chanan.
But that's difficult to understand.
Why?
Because the pirsha is garbage. It's not. How do you get chanan in some milk?
Exactly. So I don't think he says it midaraisa. But you're right. It's not a real chanan. But he says it's like a chanan legabe deshir that would be required to be mevatel it. Anyway, I'm not going to get into that too much of that.
It's a shame you can't bring these people over here and have them questions.
So anyway, let's just finish up with a good kasha here. That was a kasha that Nilan brought up. That's a Shach's question. Why shishim is enough when you're dealing with, even according to the Mechaber, but according to the Mechaber, it's mutter. Why would you shishim enough connected the whole milk here? And we don't, and we don't say davar amayim over here. In other words, in the milk, in the regular milk, if you have shishim in the vat, connected this problematic pirsha, it will be enough. If we hold that davar mamid is not bottle, and here, what are we doing? We're trying to be mamid gvina. So what's the answer? Very simple. We discussed it. Davar mamid is only a problem when you're dealing with a real isser, like an isser nevela. You take a piece of rennet that may be questionable from a nevela, from a treif animal, and you make cheese, and there's no problem with basar b'chalav because it's dry, it's still davar amaymed. Unless it's completely not edible at all, then of course it's not going to be davar amaymed either. Perhaps it's not also behano. Yes.
It's not usher. It's a davar amaymed. But why is it usher?
Right.
It's a nevela.
You're talking about our case.
No, he's talking about your place.
In the case, when is davar amaymed a problem? When you have nevela. This nevela is so powerful, it's maimed, the kvina.
It's never going to become a spatula and scissors.
Exactly. But this is not also machmas atzmoi. The case over here, do we really have here an isser machmas atzmoi? We don't. We have an isser belua here. We have here a belia of basar in this chalav. Elamai, you're going to tell me, well, wait a minute. This is a real Isser D'Oraisa. It's a Basar B'chalav as much as the Nevela is. It's an Isser. Huh?
With the Persia, we said it's not an Isser D'Oraisa of Hanan. But,
Right.
what is being mamid here is not the Persia. It's not the Persia that's being mamid. It's the Kiva that's Balua that's being mamid.
No, the Pirsha is being mamid.
So it's the Persia that's being mamid?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, nothing else. I thought it was the Persia did not have the strength to be mamid. It was. No, so if it's the Persia, it's mamid, it's the difference then.
Yeah. So,
But if it was the Kiva that was Balua, it wouldn't help me that it's Persia. I mean, it's not the Isser.
no, it's not Osir. The
It's
Keva,
not the Isser that's being...
the Keva is not Osir here. It's kosher animal. It's a kosher
It's
Keva.
not the
Yeah.
Isser that is performing the act of mamid thing.
Right.
The Isser is not the one that's performing the function of being a mamid.
Right.
The Persia is being the mamid,
Right.
and that Persia as being the mamid is carrying within it something that's not Asr, but that, once it becomes mixed with the milk, becomes Asr.
To bottle down.
The taste of the
Wine is
keva,
not
the taste of the stomach,
Right.
that is being transported by the Persia,
Right.
it is, once it becomes mixed with the milk, is an Isser. But that taste of the keva, that once it becomes mixed with the milk, is an Isser, is not the one that is being mamid the milk to make
No,
it.
okay, let me explain it a little bit differently. The Basar that eventually may end up in the vat is not a problem. The Tam. Okay?
If you have 6.
Right, if you have 60. Elamai, we want to see Davar Mamid. It in itself is not a Davar Mamid.
Yeah, it is.
It's not available. However, even though it was Basar B'chalav at one point, even though you may say, according to the ones who are Machmir, that that Solol is a problem. The Pirsha, not Mechaber. Even the ones who are Machmir, this is Solol, Chalav, this is Basar B'chalav.
But the fact
And Basar B'chalav
is
is like an Avela.
But the Basar B'chalav is not what's being mamid.
What?
But the Basar B'chalav is not what's being mamid.
No, the combination of Basar B'chalav here is being Maimid.
No, the mamid is the Pirsha, I think.
Yeah.
Okay.
The Pirsha with the meat is a Basar B'chalav, kind of Basar B'chalav. But the answer is very simple. Even if this would be a real Basar B'chalav, the answer would be just like an Avela. What do
Of course.
Right. But you know why this is not a real Basar B'chalav, even if it's solul, liquid form? Because it was never cooked. They were never cooked together.
Salted.
It was only salted. So since there was no bishul here of a potential Basar B'chalav, even if you're Machmir, so therefore you don't have a real Davar HaMaimid here. Davar HaMaimid is only when you have a real Isser. Then you're Machmir on it's not Basar, but this
You
is
have
not.
a Davar HaMaimid.
You have
But
the
the
ingredient.
Isser,
But the Isser, it's not a Davar HaMaimid that is Asr in itself.
the Isser aspect of it is not.
Yeah, Bigufoy, it's not a Davar HaMaimid. It was either salted or nichbash. It was not cooked.
So it's a rabbinical prohibition. It's a Raisa prohibition.
Huh?
So then it's a rabbinical prohibition. That's a Raisa prohibition. So if you have a rabbinical prohibition, the Davar HaMamid will be misbatul.
That was a question. We'll talk about it. If the Isser is a Durabanan,
Yeah.
you have two Durabanans. Yeah, we don't say it. That's the same question by a royal Iskabet. The Rabbanan were Machmir on an Isser Duraisa, but not necessarily on another Isser Durabanan to see that. Right.
So
here,
is that the argument here?
no, here it's not an argument so much because the whole thing is a Durabanan, regardless of how you look at it. Kimat, everybody agrees. Kimat, everybody agrees it's a Durabanan.
Okay, which portion of it right now are you calling a rosh? The Davar HaMamid or the Tzalul?
The combination of the Basar,
With the
of the
Pirsha.
Keva with the Pirsha, the way they combine, they never combine through cooking.
Those are the Rabbanan.
So even if you call that Pirsha Cholav, you're right, according to Mechaber it's Pirsha, forget it, it's never a problem. But even if you were to call it a problem,
Because of Tzalul.
because it's all, even if you were to say it's a problem, it really never can become a Davar Aman because it's not an Isur Migufay. It doesn't have its own, it's not an Isur. The problem is the taste of the Basar.
Well, the Rabbanan, it is an
Yeah,
Isser.
yeah.
The Rabbanan would be an Isser. By
Yeah,
Tzalul, the Rabbanan
well
would
that's
be
why
an
it's also, he says don't use it. He says don't use it to make cheese. Why? Obviously because it has absorbed the tam of Basar. Only because it has absorbed the tam of Basar.
But this is now not dependent on
Yeah.
Tzalul.
Well,
Because it's absorbed the time of the Basar.
according to the
even
Ramah, it
Mechaber.
would be a problem if it's Solo. According to the Mechaber, you would not make
No,
a
but the
difference.
absorbed time should be, even according to the Mechaber, a problem, as you say there.
Well, that's what the Dachim explains.
Uh-huh.
That B'di'evet it's not a problem. Why not? Don't I need Shishim?
That's
No.
according to the Ramah.
That's
with
according to the
Tzalul.
Ramah
With the Tzalul.
with only with the Tzalal. And according to the Mechaber, even if it's B'di'evet it's okay, but what's the Lechatchila? The Lechatchila is that even if I have, pirsha, even if it's pirsha, it has the tamabasa that's going in. Obviously, if you had shishim, there would be not a problem of lechatchila. What would be the only problem if you have shishim to begin with? Is this called mevatel iser lechatchila or not? And we will talk about it, Mitzvah next week, Thursday, that when you don't want the tam of something, all you want to do is make cheese. This question comes about with rennet or gelatin. You don't want the tam. You don't want what's coming from there. You just want to make the cheese. Is that still called mevatel iser lechatchila? When you are, when you're putting it into the mixture, all you want to do is you want this gelatin not because you want the flavor. You want its effect. So some say if you want the effect and not the flavor, that's not called being mevatel the iser lechatchila. Even though that's happening.
I was just about to guess probably machlokas.
Yeah, not everybody goes along with that. Yeah, so that we'll talk. That's an interesting point. Is that called mevatel iser lechatchila when I don't want it to begin with? But you're doing it, yeah. But I don't care for that. I just want what it does to this. See what I mean? So that's one of the questions that arises in Bitul Isra Lechatchila. So here, it wouldn't be a problem at all. Why? Because obviously, B'di'evet, according to Mechaber, it never began as a real problem. We're just Machmir, also Lehamid boy, but it ends up being a Pirsha. The Ramah, who made the distinction between Tzol, obviously he's concerned if it got salted together. But it would never be a Davar Mamid because it's not an Isra Migufay. Okay.